Now we're going to get to the heart of the matter, the jacks, the part that actually plucks the strings, and the tuning pins. So I'll get this out of the way. Get this here in preparation. These tuning pins, by the way, are also handmade one at a time by the same blacksmith that makes the hinges on the instruments. For what it's worth, I make these little hand stops here and I make these hooks myself. That's just one of those things that I've always done. So it's just been a part of every instrument. But at any rate, these tuning pins are handmade. They're done approximately in the style of the antique tuning pins. There are some things about them that make them one of the factors, the tuning stability that my instruments are noted for. Okay, you've got two sets of tuning pins. You've got one for each of the two sets of strings on the instrument. You need to pay attention to this. The set of tuning pins closest to the player operate the set of jacks furthest away from the player. The set of tuning pins furthest away from the player operate the set of jacks closest, the set of strings with the jacks closest to the player. And I've got red felts, key felts, on the C tuning pins. This will enable you to very quickly find where you are in tuning the instrument. Otherwise, you do it visually simply by looking at which jack is going up and down under the jack rail as you're pushing the key like this. And you can just follow that back and see what tuning pin you need to be doing. In our future discussions on servicing the instrument, I will be referring to the back set and the front set. When I do that, I'm not referring to the location of the tuning pins, I'm referring to the registers, and the one furthest away I call the back set. The one with the jacks closest to the player I call the front set. Just remember that the tuning pins are the opposite, okay, as I explained a moment ago. Also on a harpsichord, unlike the piano, the wide pairs are the unisons. On the piano, the close pairs and triplets, whether double up in threes, are the unisons. On a harpsichord, the wide pairs are the unisons. Also, too, I'm going to interject here. We use a lot of organ terminology with the harpsichord, and in many ways, the harpsichord is more akin to the organ than it is to the piano. We refer to these stops as being 8-foot stops, which is the speaking length for middle C on a principal pipe on a pipe organ. We have 4-foot stops on other models of harpsichords, and it's the same terminology. We refer to these as hand stops or stops, and you have stops on a pipe organ. And we refer to these as registers or slides or sliders, the same thing that you have on a tracker organ. And essentially they work the same way. On a pipe organ, just to help you conceptualize what happens here, on a pipe organ you have wind under pressure in a chest. And before that wind can get to the pipes, a slider has to move to the left or to the right, allowing the holes in that slider strip to align themselves with the holes in the chest, providing a clear passageway all the way through for the wind to the toe of the pipe. When the slider is pulled to the off position, the parts of the slider that don't have a hole are covering the holes in the chest. It's blocked. When the slider is in the on position, the holes are open and the wind can go through. On the harpsichord, the registers move to the left or right, and what happens with the harpsichord is plucking motion, plucking action rather, at the string. The keys are depressed. They're a simple first-class lever, like a teeter-totter is a first-class lever. You push it down in the front and the jacks rise up on the back and pluck the strings. We'll be looking at those in a moment. And the jacks are always moving. Both sets of jacks are always moving. They're either plucking or they're not plucking, just like the holes are either covered or uncovered in the organ chest. The jacks are either plucking or not, depending on whether you've got the slider moved over to the on position or the slider moved to the off position. So conceptually, it operates the same way. I'm going to go ahead and move from the tuning pins right up to the buff stop. We were talking about this a minute ago. I was showing it to you before the camera was on again. These are small leather pads, soft leather pads that touch the string, okay? And they create can actually, just like a strumming a lute or a guitar, you can arpeggiate your chords and get kind of like a guitar strum from this. It's a very pleasant effect. This is found on all antique harpsichords as a rule, except Italian instruments. Early Flemish harpsichords and Spanish harpsichords have split buffs. Spanish harpsichords even had split registers. They would split here at the C sharp, and that, of course, provided other registration possibilities. So it's a normal thing to have on a harpsichord. It's a very simple movement with this knob to the left or to the right. Okay, it's delicate. If you get too physical with it, you can break it. You don't want to manhandle these leather pads in any way. That's very important not to do that. They need to be left alone because they can get knocked out of adjustment. It's leather, which is very hygroscopic and subject to weather changes. So it's a very sensitive adjustment. I voice my buff stops to where they allow the string to sing through ever so slightly, and it produces a very beautiful sound. I wish more harpsichord makers would do this, but because of that lightness of touch, it's a little bit more finicky with humid weather. So all the more reason to not get physical with the pads. Okay, jack rail. That's this piece here. The hooks engage to the front of the instrument. Perhaps due to this video, you will be the first customers in the history of my business to get this right. All Kingston harpsichords, the jack rail has the serial number on the treble end. Treble end, hooks hooked towards the player. Okay, you may have to wiggle and finagle these a little bit. You just draw them in tight. Friction will hold them there. Now, in a concert setting, when you sit down to the instrument, you've got to be sure your score is in place, put your music down, you check, make sure all your registration and everything is right, and everything else. Give these a quick check. Get in the habit of doing that even when you're not in a concert situation. Why? Because if they're not fully tight, they'll work themselves loose during the piece. And usually in a concert situation, or oftentimes in a concert situation, either you or a technician has just been out there doing a tuning on the instrument. And he may have had a damper that wasn't working, and he had to very quickly, you know, the crowd's already coming in the doors, it's 10 minutes after 8, and he's in here, and he put this back, and you know, he set them like that, and he took off. And one of them wasn't brought up all the way. And it starts there, and it just keeps working its way out. And there, it's like Dracula rising from this coffin in the middle of the aria to the Goldbergs. The audience is seeing this taking place. And I have sat out in the audience with one of my instruments being used, matter of fact, by the famous harpsichordist at Oberlin, Lisa Crawford. And it showed her skill as a player. She was doing Scarlatti sonatas too. It never came off all the way, but I kept watching this thing all the way through the performance. I later found out at one point in her training, she explained to me that she practiced with the jack rail unhooked to learn to lighten her touch. So that paid off. At any rate, once more, to be sure that the hook is fully secured, when you bring it back into the lute, give it just a little extra tug to be sure that it's all the way up into the lute and fastened. One more time.